It's not really a secret that I love snakes. If you look around me, you can see mostly snakes in this room. I absolutely love the slithery little friends. They are my favorite animals in the world, and I think that they are the best pets. But there are 5 pet snakes that I think are criminally underrated in the hobby that definitely deserve their time in the spotlight. So today we're going to be talking about the 5 most underrated pet snakes in the reptile hobby. Alrighty, so coming in at number 5, we have the African house snake. So this is a smaller species of snake. They, I believe, are a colubrid. The specific African house snake that I personally had experience with was the black African house snake. I think that the taxonomy is Boedon foliosa. I could be wrong, but I think that's correct. And he was pretty good. He was a little bit nippy, but overall, he was a pretty good pet snake. These guys come from Africa, and the black African house snake, which as I said is the one I have experience with, are found in Africa. I kept my African house snake fairly similar to how I would recommend you keep a ball python, but I kept his humidity on the lower end compared to ball python humidity levels, which you need in the 60 to 80% range. But my African house snake stayed at about 50% humidity, and he did very, very well. Always shed complete in one piece, and he never had any issues with respiratory infections at the 50% humidity level. Now, why I think these guys are so underrated is they are a wonderful pet snake. They're about as easy to take care of as your corn snakes and king snakes, a similar sized animal, a little bit smaller than corn snakes, so they need a similar sized enclosure, but you could get away with something smaller. You could probably get away with a 40-gallon for an adult male African house snake, whereas I would recommend a 4x2x4 probably for a corn snake. 4x2x2 would probably be okay, but corn snakes definitely like to explore, so I like to give them more height. And overall, African house snakes are pretty docile snakes. You might get a bite once or twice, especially if you get a baby or an imported individual that is not captive bred and used to human interaction. But if you work with your African house snake, they will definitely calm down and be very handleable snakes. And just look at them. They're beautiful. The black African house snake is my personal favorite. They have that beautiful black sheen, iridescence that's absolutely stunning. And you can also get some morphs like albino and blue-eyed Lucy. So there are definitely a lot of morphs of these snakes, and they're so easy to care for. They're great feeders, and they're pretty good handling snakes. They're obviously not so big like a reticulated python that you're going to need a second person in the room with you when you're handling them, but they're not so small like garter snakes where you might be a little bit worried that you're going to break them if you aren't too careful. They're definitely robust enough that they are comfortable to be handled. I would be pretty confident passing off an adult house snake to a kid at like a reptile show or a program. I wouldn't be that concerned as long as you keep an eye on it. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why the African house snake is not a more widely available pet snake. You can find them pretty much anywhere, but nobody is really recommending them as pet snakes that often. I know Leafy Street has, I believe he has 4 house snakes. He might have more than that. And he talks about why they're probably the best beginner snake. And I would definitely agree with that. They are the best beginner pet snake. So I really hope that these guys get more of a spotlight and people understand just how perfect these are as pets. Honestly, I don't think that you can get more perfect than an African house snake, especially for a first pet snake. Alrighty, so coming in at number 4, we have Cribos. Now, I'm going to be lumping the black-tailed Cribo and the yellow-tailed Cribo into the same category. They are by no means the same snake, but they are both in the same family and fairly closely related. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of an unpopular opinion here. People love the black-tailed Cribos. Black-tailed Cribos are beautiful. They are big colubrids, beautiful copper coloration with that jet black tail. Absolutely stunning. However, I prefer the yellow-tailed Cribos. I actually think that they are prettier. They have that silvery gray body color with the highlighter yellow tail. It just doesn't really get much better than that for a snake. Now these are big colubrids. They're bigger than bull snakes. I believe that they get about 8 foot. I'll correct myself here if I'm wrong. And their food motivation, as I said before, absolutely incredible. They're very active snakes. I have a friend that has a couple of yellowtail and blacktail cribos, and those snakes, no matter what time of day, they're always cruising around. They're either looking for food, basking, climbing around on their branches. They're always doing something. The only ones that I really saw in hide boxes were females that were on eggs. So that goes back into the, if you want just a snake that is going to be a beautiful display animal, these guys will move around a lot, so you'll be able to see them. It's not like with the African house snake, while they're a great pet snake, mine was always burrowed, so it looked like I had a box of wood shavings. You're not going to have that issue with the cribo, which is amazing. I can't believe I don't have a cribo already. Probably next year. So yeah, overall, blacktail and yellowtail cribos are really cool snakes. They're a little bit more difficult to take care of than, say, an African house snake, of course. They need higher humidity, much bigger enclosures. I would probably recommend an 8x4x4 for adult cribos. I think that some people say smaller than that, but for a snake that's as large as a cribo is, that's as active as they are, I would definitely recommend having a bigger enclosure. But yeah, so blacktail and yellowtail cribos, number 4 on this list. Alrighty, so number 3 on this list, we have carpet pythons. Now, as somebody who is an avid fan of the Morelia Python Radio podcast, it pains me just to say carpet pythons, but for a broader audience, I'm just going to lump them all together, which, again, kind of hurts my soul. So, I've only ever had one carpet python. I wish that I still had her. I don't know why I sold her, honestly, but I did, and it's probably one of my bigger regrets as far as selling animals goes. But I had a jungle carpet python, and she was gorgeous. An absolutely beautiful snake that was always out. She was always, like, hanging out in the trees, because these guys do like height. If you give your carpet pythons height, they will use it for sure. And seeing that beautiful jet black and highlighter yellow banding all the way down from the end of her nose to the end of her tail, it was just beautiful. So my biggest issue with carpet pythons is their temperament. I'm going to be completely honest, their temperament leaves something to be desired. I have had very good interactions with carpet pythons, and I've had some really negative interactions with really defensive carpet pythons. It really just depends on the individual. My carpet python was kind of a 50-50 shot. If you pulled her out with a snake hook, put her in your hands, she would probably be okay. She might get a little bit defensive, but if I pulled out a camera, she'd get real defensive really fast. But if you get a baby carpet python and you work with it, so long as you're not overworking with them to the point that they are being stressed out, you can definitely get them tolerant and handleable as snakes, which is one of the best things about having snakes. Honestly, personally, I prefer looking at my snakes in their enclosures to handling them, but I know that most people prefer handling their snakes, so if you work with these carpet pythons, they can definitely be good handling snakes. And one of the other issues with them is that a lot of them are from Australia. I believe there are a couple of carpet pythons that are not from Australia, like Papuan carpet pythons, but most of the carpet pythons that we see in captivity are from Australian bloodlines. And I recently learned on this podcast that some of these different species of carpet pythons that we say are certain strains from these like 5 different blood types that we got into the country is not true. These animals are all related, which is an issue with breeding snakes. It's not as big of an issue with inbreeding and crossing these sort of inbred generations as it will be with mammals, because reptiles don't spread out quite as much as, say, mammals do in the wild, so there's obviously going to be some crossing out in the wild. So reptiles can stand it, but it is going to get to a point where that's not going to work anymore, and that's really unfortunate. So hopefully someday in my lifetime, Australia will loosen its policy on imports and exports so that the Australian viewers can get some pretty cool snakes from all around the world, and so that we can get some more bloodlines of these carpet pythons and other Australian snakes here in the States and in Europe and all around the world to strengthen these populations and make sure that these snakes are around in captivity for generations to come. So, carpet pythons are number 3 on this list. There are 2 more. Now I'm going to stop you right there. If you're enjoying this video so far, please go down into the comment section below and tell me if you agree with my list so far. If you disagree, tell me why, tell me what you would put in place. And once you finish watching this video all the way through, because it really helps me out, I would really appreciate it if you would tell me what you think the last two should have been if you disagree with me, which, let's be honest, is the internet. We're going to disagree with each other all the time. So, I look forward to having some constructive conversations with all of you in the comments down below. But without any more talking, let's get back to the snakes. Alrighty, so number 2 on the list is a snake that I have loved since I was a wee little child. Actually, I guess the last 2 are snakes I've loved since I was a wee little child. But number 2 on this list is going to be olive pythons. So if you don't know what an olive python is, on the outward appearance, they're not that striking of a snake. They're a pretty brownish, olivey almost color, which isn't necessarily the most appealing, but while I love the bright yellows, like I've said, I also kind of like the very simple coloration and patterns on snakes. And these guys definitely have that. I've seen some kind of olivey green olive pythons, I've seen some brown ones, I've seen some gray ones, but they're never as striking as, say, an anaconda or a carpet python. But they still have their own level of beauty that I think people really don't recognize as much as they should. Now, why I think these are wonderful captives is, for one, they're another snake that will spend a lot of time in the trees, so you'll definitely be able to see them climbing around a lot, and they're great feeders. And while not only they will hang out in the trees, you'll also get a great feeding response out of these guys. These guys eat like champs, which is also a downside to them. While I think that having a snake that eats is fantastic, it's pretty easy to overfeed a snake that will eat every time you offer it food. And I've seen some pretty obese olive pythons. Now, something about olive pythons that I think is kind of odd is that they're not classified as larger constrictors, because I definitely think they are. I have seen like 8 to 10 foot olive pythons, and while yes, they're skinnier, they are still that long, and they're very strong snakes. These olive pythons are deceptively strong. You wouldn't think that something this skinny is going to be able to grip on as tightly as it can, but they really can. But a 10-foot olive python is definitely not going to be as difficult to handle as a 10-foot reticulated python. Retics are thicker, they are stronger. So this is another snake that I hope really gets more recognition in the hobby, especially here in the States. I know that they're pretty common down in Australia because that's where they're from, so they'll still have that same issue with the we can't get them out of Australia that carpet pythons had, but they're beautiful snakes. But they're awesome snakes, and they're awesome captives. Alrighty, so the number 1 most underrated snake of all time. You probably all could have guessed what this was from the start of this video if you've watched any of my videos. It's yellow anacondas. Yellow anacondas are the best and coolest pet snakes. I don't know why they have such a stigma around them. Okay, well, I know why. There are some thumbnails out there that make these things seem like they're out to get you all the time. And they definitely do have a reputation that some of them do live up to, where they're pretty defensive snakes. But if you get some that are captive bred, you work with them, especially from a young age, they're not going to have those big issues. Salazar, my big yellow anaconda, has struck at me once. That was on camera. He has defensively struck at me once. Oh, Jesus! I had him strike out at me for food once, but in his defense, there was food in my tongs hand, and he just came the wrong direction. But that's not him being defensive at all. That is something that you should expect with snakes. That's why you have to be careful and watch what you're doing when you are working with these larger snakes. But yellow anacondas are such a unique species of snake because while they're big and fat, they're a boa, they're a water boa, as they're called in some places in South America. Yeah, they're going to spend a lot of time in the water, but I've also seen them spending a lot of time climbing. When I've seen people give them the opportunities to climb around on big, thick branches, they will take it. I've seen more than my fair share of pictures of people with these nice Universal Rocks backgrounds with their anacondas hanging out at the tops of them. My anaconda up here, he loves to sit up around the top of that foam background that I made. He spends most of his time up high or on his big branch in that enclosure. And again, these are one of the prettiest snakes in the world, especially for a non-venomous snake. Sure, they are a big constrictor, so that has its own element of danger, just like any big dog has its own element of danger, but as long as you are careful, you do your research and know what you're getting into, it shouldn't really be an issue in your captive collection. Now, how do they eat? Well, these guys are boas and they eat like boas. My big male Salazar, he has never refused a meal, and I am actively on the hunt for a big, ready-to-breed female yellow anaconda that is docile, because I don't really want a big female anaconda that the previous owner has not worked with. Because I've definitely seen some people where they'll get bit a few times by their snake, and then they never want to work with it again. Which is not how you get them to calm down and get habituated to handling. You need to be willing to take a few bites from a smaller snake. Nettlebrand, he's still not great. He'll still strike at you because I fell into that mistake early on in keeping, and still today. I get really freaked out by snake bites, so I'll do anything in the world to avoid them. Whereas some other keepers that I've seen that have much more docile and habituated snakes tend to just roll with the punches. They'll take a bite if they need to, just to do what they need to do and let the snake know that biting them is not going to get them to stop handling them. Whereas early days here in Repti-verse, if Nettlebrand bit me, I would just put him away. I wouldn't touch him for weeks. Which is not at all the approach I should have taken, and if I hadn't done that, he would probably be a much better snake. Now, he has gotten better. I do hook train all of my snakes, so if I'm pulling him out for cleaning and I hook him and put him in the water, he used to strike out of the water from that. He doesn't do that anymore. Now he knows that he's going to get a warm water bath while I clean his enclosure, so you can definitely habituate them to that. Yellow anacondas don't get as big as people make them out to get. Some people will say that they're going to get 15 plus feet long. These people are wrong. I believe the largest yellow anaconda ever recorded was like 13 and a half, maybe 14 feet, but that is incredibly uncommon. I typically see them in the 7 to 9 foot range. Some females might get 10, 11 foot, but especially if you're getting a male, like 7, 8 foot is probably about where they're going to top out. They might get a little bit bigger than that, but it's not going to be like a green anaconda where someday you're going to wake up and have a 15 foot, 200 pound anaconda. And once again, I have to talk about, I'm going to talk this to death. The pattern on these snakes and the coloration is gorgeous. Salazar, he is probably the prettiest snake I've ever seen. He has those perfect black saddles with the bright yellow between all of them and a gorgeous iridescence when he's out in the light. He's a beautiful snake, and I can't wait to finally get him into an enclosure like this. I'm going to be probably building him an 8x4x4 with a nice big universal rocks background, plenty of places to climb as I was talking about before, with a little pond for him to swim around in, because they definitely do well with a lot of water, as you would expect with an anaconda. So that's definitely why I think that yellow anacondas are the most underrated pet snake. They get a reputation that they definitely don't deserve. So that is why the yellow anaconda is going to come in at number 1 on our list for the most underrated pet snake. They have a reputation that they don't deserve. They're beautiful snakes. They do very well in nice, pretty enclosures with plenty of places to climb and swim. They'll take advantage of all of those opportunities, and they will eat for you for sure. This is everything that I want in a snake, and while they're definitely not a beginner snake, because they can have a little bit of that attitude, especially as babies if you don't handle them, and they're a pretty strong snake. My yellow anaconda is probably one of the strongest snakes I've ever handled. So I definitely wouldn't recommend them for somebody who's inexperienced, but if you're looking to take that next step for a larger constrictor and you think that you're ready, I absolutely recommend yellow anacondas. If you agreed with this list, definitely smash the like button. If you disagreed, still smash the like button and leave a comment down below telling me why you disagree so we can have a constructive conversation about it in the comments down below. In the description to this video, I'm going to leave a link to my Patreon page and a link to go support US ARC. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I love you all. Thank you so much for choosing to spend part of your day here with me. It means the absolute world to me, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace out, YouTube.